buenas tardes. Antes de empezar con la presentación de la doctora Carmen Pérez Almagro, va a decir unas palabras en representación del Colegio de Murcia, porque se le ha otorgado un premio a la obra de Félix Escrit. Entonces, pues ella comentará ese nombramiento. Le dejo con ella y después ya pasaremos a Carmen y a Emilio.
Buenos días a todos, los que nos hemos reunido aquí apasionados por la arquitectura transformable. En nombre del Colegio de Arquitectos de Murcia, quiero agradecer a la organización del Congreso, a José Sánchez, a la Universidad de Sevilla, a la Fundación Pérez Piñero y a Emilio Pérez Belda el esfuerzo y la dedicación que nos consta han realizado para llevar a cabo este Congreso. Permítanme, en primer lugar, disculpar la asistencia del decano, Antonio García Herrera, que no puede asistir a este Congreso por encontrarse en el Pleno de Consejeros del Consejo Superior, que, entre otras cosas, está tratando el anteproyecto de ley de servicios profesionales que tanto nos preocupa a todos. Por tanto, en nombre suyo y en la Junta de Gobierno del Colegio, hoy especialmente quiero manifestar nuestro reconocimiento a este gran arquitecto, compañero y amigo, Félix Escrit. No hace todavía un año que nuestro colegio, con mucha ilusión y orgullo, organizó la exposición homenaje a la figura de Emilio Pérez Piñero, coincidiendo con el 40 aniversario de su fallecimiento. Emilio Pérez Piñero fue un arquitecto que supo poner a aquella España de los años 60 en el mapa mundial de la arquitectura, y no solo de la arquitectura, sino también de las artes y el diseño. El Colegio de Arquitectos de Murcia, con motivo de esta exposición y en homenaje a su figura, creó un premio denominado Premio Emilio Pérez Piñero, que se otorgaría en reconocimiento a aquellas personas o instituciones que se hubieran distinguido por sus aportaciones a la investigación y el desarrollo tecnológico en la arquitectura. Es mi misión hoy aquí anunciar el ganador de este premio. La Junta de Gobierno del Colegio de Arquitectos de Murcia, en acuerdo de 3 de septiembre de 2013, acordó otorgar este premio especial al ilustrísimo señor Félix Escrit Pallarés. Con motivo de la exposición homenaje, invitamos a Félix Escrit a participar en estas jornadas. Siempre amable, siempre dispuesto a colaborar, aceptó impartir la conferencia de clausura de las jornadas homenaje. Quisiera citar, después de ver sus vídeos y después de encargarme de hacer esta ponencia, unas palabras que él mismo dijo y que me parecen que hoy aquí son muy importantes. Comenzó diciendo: si estoy aquí, principalmente es porque considero a Emilio Pérez Piñero mi maestro. Cuando yo lo conocí, él ya había muerto. No tuve la suerte de conocerle, de manera que gran parte de mi trabajo se debe a su magisterio, a la forma en la que ejerció sus proyectos, su concepto de la geometría, y este ha sido un ejercicio permanente en mí. Por todo ello, el Colegio de Murcia quiere reconocer y conceder este premio especial a su extensa carrera, a sus proyectos y a sus aportaciones en la investigación en el campo de las estructuras ligeras, transformables y textiles. Este premio significa la unión de arquitectos españoles de diferentes épocas que, enlazados por un mismo sentir y por un mismo impulso en la búsqueda de nuevos retos, soluciones que hoy en día pueden ser soluciones económicas, en medios, sostenibles, reutilizables, y todas ellas son principios de la arquitectura más vanguardista. Queremos felicitar al ganador del concurso organizado por este congreso, Antonio Manuel Bueno Bleda, por su proyecto Retroalmazara, una creativa y hermosa estructura desplegable basada en un hiperboloide. Como en su momento Emilio Pérez Piñero logró poner el nombre de España en todo el mundo con sus estructuras desplegables, este congreso Transformables 2013, a partir de ahora y gracias en gran medida al trabajo de Félix Escrit y de José Sánchez, será un referente a nivel internacional. Desde el Colegio de Arquitectos de Murcia brindamos nuestra colaboración y estamos seguros de que este congreso es ya un punto de partida para la innovación y significará una referencia fundamental para el futuro. Muchas gracias.
Bien, a continuación, ya siguiendo el programa, le doy la palabra a Carmen Pérez Almagro, que presentará una ponencia a través de, con la Fundación Emilio Pérez Piñero.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am glad to participate in this international congress in honor of Emilio Pérez Piñero. I would like to thank the organizer for their invitation and wish them every success now and in the future. I cannot begin my lecture without expressing my sorrow for the loss of its promoter, Professor Félix Escrig, who worked so hard to develop the works of Pérez Piñero at an international level. I would like finally to express my condolences to his families for his vast loss, both from a personal and scientific point of view. My lecture will seek to place in space and time some of the marking features of the 60s and some of the most innovative experimental buildings of the decade. The second part of this lecture will focus on the impact of Pérez Piñero works without forgetting his methods and techniques. During the last century's 60s, a whole series of decisive historical events changed the social and the political landscape at international level, having a direct effect on the technological advancement of the time. Architecture, which affected by historical events, however, only the most innovative contributions have survived in our memory. That's the reason why certain individual and collective architectural contributions called experimental, utopian, or futuristic stood out among other works during the third quarter of the 20th century, particularly in Western Europe, America, and Japan. The world was changing fast in the years of the Cold War, the Beatles, the hippie movement, Frenchmen, 1969, and so on. The population was aware of itself and of the new opportunity provided their life by science and technology. Architects also contribute to these changing times, integrating new parameters, such as speed and magnitude, into their works. Cities were thought and designed. Distances were shortened due to the increase in speed of communication. Motor vehicles became an unavoidable reality people have to live with. In the image, you can see some of the most important milestones of the decade. In the automotive field, Toyota replaced the four manufacturing standards, the legendary Ops 10, Mini, and Seat 600, the icon of the Spanish development. In 1961, Yuri Gagarin was the first man to go to the space. However, eventually, victory fell of the side of the United States of America when Neil Armstrong landed on the moon. the Beatles, the Rolling Stones. This year were also marked by the decolonization of the last European colonies in Africa, such as Angola. At that time, still under General Franco's dictatorship, was changing its economic system from national self-sufficiency to a more liberal government of technocrats and members of Opus Dei. The country was living in a context of international prosperity. Progressive market liberalization resulted in high industrial production rates and a considerable rise in people's purchasing power. In 1969, the regime tried to acquire a more permissive image by enacting a new form of organic democracy. In these slides, you can appreciate some of the features that made his country different. Spain is different, as the official propaganda used to proclaim. In the first photo, news and documentary, Nodo was a powerful tool used by official propaganda to indoctrinate the population through cinema screens. Religious morality was very present in daily life. The topics of the bullfighter and flamenco were our image as a country, in contrast to the new fashion brought by foreign tourists. This was the cultural context of the country when Pérez Piñero appeared. General Franco's regime made good use of the occasion to improve its international image. Pérez Piñero was the young, brilliant architect we could be proud of, both inside and outside the country, as he represented modernity. He was the architect of peace, too. During this period, architects started to undertake serious research on lighter, newer materials to be used in prefabricated systems. The use of reinforced concrete, glass, or steel in neat plan geometries became more and more frequent, resulting in a more rational use of materials. These architects didn't aspire to be included in any particular trend or school. They were forced to balance theory and technique in an attempt to make their ideas come true by means of the greatest efficiency in the use of materials, as in the case of Pérez Piñero. Before focusing on Pérez Piñero, we will mention some of his contemporary fellows who strongly influenced the 60 decades. First, Félix Candela, who excels in his delicate handling of geometrically perfect surfaces, creating thinner than 2 centimeters. Reinforced concrete hyperbolic paraboloids, like in his Xochimilco, is the first image, and Comis Rice Pavilion in Mexico. In the middle of the Spice Age, when thousands of motor cars massively flooded in the city, it was important to find innovative solutions in order to face the new technological challenges. For this reason, many of the time architectural schools or entrants mainly focus on experimentation. We can mention, among others, the neo-expressionist trend, the membrane structures faction, the modular architecture, the metabolism movement, the archigram group, and the works of Richard Buckminster Fuller. These trends were a consequence of the architectural and engineering advancements of the time, which gradually allowed to cover large spans with reinforced concrete laminar structure. New concepts, such as spatial structures, made of interlocking metal rods, were later developed. A key factor for this evolution was the International Association for Cell Structures, which a decade later became the International Association for Cell and Spatial Structure. This evolution can be clearly perceived in the space built for the Olympic Games, where the latest technological innovations are usually displayed. In the image, you can have a look of the Olympic stadiums of the 60s. Luigi Nervi built the Palazzetto dello Sport in Rome in 1960. Kenzo Tange performed the Yoyosi National Gymnasium in Tokyo. In 1968, Félix Candela built the Palacio de los Deportes in Mexico. And finally, Fray Otto's Olympiad Stadio München. The modernist movement was the first to consider that reformulating the concept of space could result in new architectural forms. They bet on creating new forms that did not always respect the principle of formal unity of classical forms. With the development of new building techniques based on reinforced concrete, non-spherical curved surfaces came up again. They moved away from rational conceptions, betting on other forms more suitable to capture the futuristic fantasies, mutant buildings, and walking cities, which live in the architect's imaginations. The New Expressionism trend was one of the pinnacles of the new architecture, introducing twisted and warped forms as a way to obtain originality and novelty in design. In this slide, you can see two examples: Eros Sarinen's Birdlight to a Terminal in New York, and John Hudson's sail-shaped Sydney Opera, which had become the city's emblem. The use of plastics was another major experimental revolution of the 60s. It gradually took a bigger place in architectural spaces, as it can be seen in war expositions. Membranes, generally characterized by lightness, were the most common lightweight structures of the decade. These constructions can equally be of a tensioned or a pneumatic kind, such as the United States Pavilion of David Geiger, and in the image, Fuji Pavilion of Yutaka Murata for Expo 70 in Osaka. The most important Spanish representative of this trend is José Miguel de Prada Pool, being Smart Structure and Instant City, two of his milestone works. Membrane architecture usually displays form related to hot color and sculptural reliefs. Compared to reinforced concrete laminar permanent constructions, this ephemeral architecture had and still has the advantages of being mobile, easy to transport, and environmentally friendly. One of the pioneers of the utopian movement was the American engineer and designer Buckminster Fuller. Among his designs stat Midtown Manhattan, and the Maxion series, the car on my right, and the Maxion series for the house. He led the way to industrialization and mechanization by transferring technical advancements from the industrial field to architecture. We owe him the resolution of the sphere triangulation by projecting the icosahedron. He was a pioneer of sustainable, environmentally friendly architecture in an effort to satisfy some of the counterculture generation demands, such as job in city, Colorado. Other visionaries of the time were Jonan Friedman and Erhard Schultz Phillips, known for their modular city and cutting-edge design. They exchanged ideas in the Coup d'étude d'Architecture Mobile, founded in 1958. Working under the principle of mobility, variability, and flexibility, this group tried to create an innovative utopian alternative aiming to solve housing problems. As a consequence of their lack of material resources, their architecture was compatible with ecology and sustainability. His modular city-urban conception later turned to be suitable to manage population, migration, and what at first seemed to be an utopian idea has become a reality in today's development projects in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Friedman's proposal inspired the Japanese avant-garde group called Metabolism, whose leader was Kisu Kurokawa. After World War II, the Japanese has been building in a different way to the Western countries. This movement, which started in 1959, grew bigger after the World Design Conference in 1960. There was an urgent need to find solutions to the three major problems of the country, namely the lack of space, natural disasters like earthquakes and tsunamis, and overcrowded cities. Flexible and extensible structures were required in order to facilitate unorganized groups. At the same time, a group of young avant-garde architects formed the Archigran Group within the Architectural Association of London. From 1961 to 1974, they edited a homonymous magazine with their theoretical and utopian projects. Known as the Beatles of architecture, they criticized the architectural culture of the time, drawing inspirations from technology. Their proposals, only expressed by hypothetical projects, were basically inspired by comics and social movements. Black City and Walking City are two of their most famous designs. The Spanish architect Pérez Piñero was and still is a pioneer in the development of modular and folding structure. Unlike the above-mentioned trends, Pérez Piñero always worked alone in his hometown Calasparra, in south of Spain. During the 10 years he practiced his profession, despite the many offers he received from the aircraft company CASA and University of Surrey, Professor Makowski. In the image, we can see Pérez Piñero with Professor Makowski. Unlike other architects, he didn't confine himself to utopian experiments, but he actually carried out his project through structures which provided solutions to real practical problems. Throughout his career, Pérez Piñero always searched for the perfect balance between matter and form, always trying to economize in resources, transport and assembly time. He excelled in building metal space frames, constructing high-stretch membranes whose ends were connected at nodes which allow the rotation or articulate rods. In Pérez Piñero's work, so I knew from the very first date that making structures was easy to me, that I was good at it. Then I decided to study them systematically. In his writings, he also dared to theorize about future cities. The innovative aesthetic and practical application of Pérez Piñero's design, which took into account the fourth dimension, placed his work within the futuristic experimental trend. The following projects can be catalogued as belonging to this trend. First, the deployable traveling theatre of 1961, reticular dome, transportable and deployable from a helicopter of 1965. Third, you can see some of this project in the small exposition in Transformables. The third project is on your right is the Antarctica 2 from 1969 to 1970. Fourth, automatical unfolding module, hypercubic glass roof, of 1971, and finally, retractable reticular cover from a spherical directrix. Pérez Piñero had to face a new challenge in every new structure. His working method consisted in building scale models where he could test the structure performance. In his first work, the deployable traveling theatre, he tried to solve the general problems arising in any given theatre, bearing in mind that his particular theatre had to be a portable building. To do so, he innovated technically by creating the first space frame easily, quickly, and simply assembled, whose transport and storage didn't involve an excessive volume or weight. On the slide, there is a table with the projects presented at the 6th Congress of the International Union of Architects, held in London. The United Kingdom, followed by the Soviet Union and the United States, were the most powerful schools. United Kingdom with 10 projects is in the first position. Surprisingly enough, Pérez Piñero was the winner among 158 students, represented 54 schools. In the days where he wrote several letters to his family, where he related his views. In the image, we can read Pérez Piñero's letter. He explained that the Soviet projects were not totally deployable like his own, and that inflatable models were the keynote of the Congress. This implies that the technological advancements of Soviet architecture schools were quickly gaining ground, as well as the growing importance of plastic-made constructions. At the end of the Congress, Pérez Piñero was personally congratulated by the Duke of Edinburgh. A month later, he was received in audience by General Franco. In Portugal, Afonso Branco de Portima was interested in the military application of his theatre. We would like to advance the hypothesis that the members of Archigram were probably aware of Pérez Piñero's works and could especially have been inspired by his first models, which had a widespread diffusion. The same year, Archigram was created. Pérez Piñero was awarded at the 6th Congress. This award was widely reported by the British and international press. Later, his works were also awarded in Sao Paulo, Munich, Brussels, and Tokyo. It is worth mentioning that research on bar structures was booming in the 60s. For that reason, his contributions were a step forward in the application of this technique, according to architect Rafael Moneo. In those days, space frames were in fashion, and nobody was really surprised by the fact that Emilio worked on them. The astonishing thing was the notice that those structures could also fall. That was the brilliant contribution of Emilio Pérez Piñero. The following experimental project to highlight is his reticular dome, transportable and deployable from a helicopter. Pérez Piñero had his idea in 1971 when he performed the traveling theatre shown in the image. This is the theatre to the 6th Congress in London. However, he didn't return to this idea up to 4 years later, when he constructed his transportable theatre for festivals of Spain. Pérez Piñero employed his high structure, this is Festival of Space, a modular structure, such as a crane, which could support the weight of the turn, transportable with a helicopter. The idea of transporting structure by helicopter also appeared in Fuller and some of the archigram's illustrations. Fuller was the cover of Time magazine in 1964, and the designs of archigram date of 1966. However, while the archigrams confined themselves to draw how helicopters could transport structures in their Plug City project, Pérez Piñero had found a real solution to the transport, assembly, and dismantling of large-span structures. His solution consisted in making good use of inner and upper nodes. The tone would fold and unfold depending on the particular nodes pulled up by the helicopter. Few years later, Pérez Piñero traveled to Mexico to join Félix Candela, with the purpose of introducing his patents in the North American market. At the beginning of 1969, he got his first opportunity. Candela had received a letter from the Structural Engineering Division of the USA Navy, in which they showed interest in employing one of Pérez Piñero's structures for the installation at geodesic operational base in Antarctica. The project consisted in creating an easy-to-assemble collapsible type of barracks. The structure should be provided with special clothing in order to bear extreme thermic conditions. To fulfill his assignment, Pérez Piñero carried out text on a modular paper model called Antarctica 1. This is Antarctica 1. Later developing his ideas on an unfolding tent called Antarctica 2. This name had been catalogued by the Foundation. When they thought that the contract was about to be signed, the Mexican intelligence services made the deal fail by holding Candelas, who was a political activist, correspondence, and thus finished with Pérez Piñero's Antarctica dream. The same year, Pérez Piñero came up with another innovation, creating a module which could serve as a greenhouse on the moon. After having received a letter from NASA, Pérez Piñero quickly initiated the study and adaptation of one of his designs. In only 20 days, he built a deployable system to be put in the satellite. This project was called Automatically Unfolding Module. When his solution arrived to NASA, it was too late, and the project was abandoned. The Mexican intelligence service had blocked Candela's mail again. The delay prevented the project from being submitted in time. In the slide, we can read Candela's word. It could have been wonderful if the first structure erected on the moon would have been built in Calasparra. In the middle of 1971, Pérez Piñero designed in only 20 days his hypercubic glass roof commissioned by Salvador Dalí, in order to close the open-air gap laying between the stalls and the stage of the Dalí Theatre Museum in Figueras, Gerona, as he used to do instead of building a traditional flat glass roof. The architect preferred to adapt one of his old ideas when he worked on the design of extensible antennas for artificial satellites. His design consisted of glazes laid on a flat structure which were able to integrally fold with the bars. Dalí had planned to paint the Holy Trinity, his most cherished work, on the glass roof. When Pérez Piñero finished the scale model, he decided to take it to Paris so that the painter could show it next to the most remarkable monument of the city, such as the Eiffel Tower or the Notre Dame Cathedral. On the grounds of the use technique, the historiography considers Pérez Piñero's retractable reticular cover drawn from a spherical directory as his last futuristic utopian design. This project would make the Campo Pequeno bullring in Lisbon one of the first indoor bullrings. For several months, Pérez Piñero worked on the retractable cover, which consisted, as its name suggests, in a drone from a spherical directories down, provided with a retractable roof. He was inspired by the mechanism of the diaphragm of a photo camera. The bull's cover was not finally built due to the tragic deaths of the authors, and soon lay after the Portuguese bullfighter Manuel dos Santos, who was the promoter of the idea. The Lisbon bullring was not covered until 2006, and this is the current state. This paper has intended to provide a wider understanding of works of Pérez Piñero in the context of the utopian and experimental architecture of the 60s. Despite living in an isolated country, his works had a great impact abroad. The architect was aware that geometrically was the basic tool for the design of any structure. In addition to his ability, he found many structural solutions, several of which have not been surpassed yet. In these proposals, he searched for a rational architecture which should be able to adapt to the needs of every particular case, always working under a strict economy, making good use of recycled materials. He became a legend in the field of folding and modular space frames, many of which have not been bettered with current technology. In addition to the quoted works, he also produced a transportable pavilion for expositions, a cinema theater to transport, the Cinerama system, theorized on mobile sport cars, greenhouses for fruit or vegetable, and so on. With almost no resources, helped by photocollage, an elementary technology, he was able to place his designs at the international forefront. 17 of his articles were published by the major specialized journals of the time. He also filed for international patents of his works. He was mentioned by regional and national press releases 150 times, especially in 1961, when he is the winner in the 6th Congress, in 1964, in 1966, and finally in 1972. The impact of Pérez Piñero's works have been noticed in 4 continents, as we can see on the map. When he died, General Director of Urbanism, Mr. Emilio Larrodera, and General Director of Information, Mr. Carlos Robles Piquer, stated that his loss was irreparable for the country. Among the more than 80 condolence telegrams received stood the one sent by the current kings of Spain, at that time Prince of Asturias. When he died, his family lost a loved one, but architecture lost a genius. Thank you for your attention.